I'm Turtle.
I'm Bunny.
And this is the Turtle and Bunny in the Roaring 20s. And in case you haven't heard yet, this is a new and upcoming podcast where we break down different topics each week and discuss what it's like trying to navigate them as women in our 20s during the 2020s.
Well, before we get into the topic, how about we kick off with a few quotes that kind of inspire us. So what about you, Turtle?
Definitely. So this week I was looking around and I actually found a quote that really resonated with me right now, which was, "Wisdom knows that relationships change over time, but courage knows when to change the relationship."
Oh, who's that by?
And I actually couldn't find out who it was by. I did a bunch of research trying to find it, and I didn't figure out who it was by. So it's from an unknown source. But I just feel like that is, it's just really powerful to me to acknowledge that it's like, yes, like logically in being a mature adult who participates in relationships, you have to come to terms with this idea that relationships change over time, partners change over time, and we have to change with them. But it is much harder and much scarier to admit to ourselves when the actual structure of the relationship needs to change or dissolve, and that takes real courage, and it's not something that is easy for everyone or that everyone can even do. And so to me that was like, it's really resonating to be like, you can tell yourself that you know that relationships change, but to stand up and acknowledge it and accept when you've reached the point when change isn't enough is a real skill that I think we all have to strive for. So yeah,
I can definitely understand that. That's actually quite similar to my quote. My dad used to say this a lot when I was younger. I'm not quite sure who the original person who said it. If anyone wants to call me out on it, I'm so here for it. But it was just like, some people come into your life for less than a reason or a season. And growing up military, that definitely was a huge thing for us because we didn't move around a lot. Like, I was lucky enough not to have been one of those people who moved around a lot, but people have come into your life like, oh, we're just going to be here for this year or for the next 2 years, or we only found you guys in 6 months, or whatever the case may be. And that was a lot to get used to, especially as a kid, because as a kid you're just like, well, I love this person, I'm attached to this person, like, why can't I keep them? Growing up, thank God for my parents. They really taught me that, like, hey, sometimes people aren't supposed to be in your life forever. They have to move on. Sometimes that's best for them, and sometimes that's best for you. So I definitely am so grateful for that kind of lesson and the simplification of it, because like, as someone who is at that age, learning that people aren't always going to be around was really beneficial, especially growing up the way I did.
Right, so that you don't develop attachment issues growing up, right? Like,
even though I still did.
I mean, we're all dealing with some level of attachment issues as adults, and I think that's part of why the topic that we're going to discuss today is one that people don't ever talk about. In fact, when I looked it up online, I could not find any articles that used this term. And our topic today is limited term relationships, the other LTR. Yes. So you'll hear about short-term relationships, and counselors talk about short-term relationships a lot, which a short-term relationship is when you're going out and you're casually dating and you know that you're not ready for a long-term relationship. You let your partners know you're not ready for a long-term relationship, and you guys are just sort of enjoying your time together. But it still is very ambiguous. You go in being like, I'm looking for nothing serious, and maybe you go on a couple dates, maybe it lasts a couple weeks, whatever, but there's not usually any hard feelings at the end of it. Yeah. But a limited term relationship is a little more complex than that.
It's actually quite interesting, especially when you think about, like, oh, I know I'm only going to be in town for 3 months. I'm only going to be seeing you for this amount of time because of insert factor here, kind of thing. One of the things was, I used to be married to a soldier, and like, I smile now because, like, the relationship is great when it was, but like, knowing that, like, hey, I'm falling in love with these people platonically, romantically, but knowing that it's not going to be forever, because at that time I was committed to being with my ex-husband, and knowing that I was, like, only going to be loving these people for, you know, this amount of time. And that was something that a lot of people could not wrap their head around. Thankfully, I'm in a military, or was in a military town at the time, so some people really understood it. And before that, I was a military kid.
Right.
So my best friend, I won't say his name, but, you know, him wrapping his head around, like, people eventually leaving and just loving them while you have them. We talked about it briefly when we were younger, and that was just something that would break his heart every time. Like, that's a good thing, that it's going to break your heart, because, you know, first of all, to avoid heartbreak is to avoid love.
Right. And we learn from heartbreak, right? And we grow. We learn what we want from relationships. We learn what we don't want from relationships. And we learn what we need to improve in ourselves, right? So, you know, there's a lot to be earned from heartbreak, but at the same time, we always enter our relationships with the intention to avoid heartbreak, right? Nobody wants to be heartbroken. Nobody wants to break somebody's heart. And that is where defined limited term relationships come into play, because having a limited term relationship, there's not quite the same expectation. But I was going to say, I don't feel like in short-term relationships, there is sometimes even a phobia of like an extended relationship or too deep feelings, because it's like, you know this isn't going anywhere.
I hate that.
So you don't invest in it. A limited term relationship, the idea is we're still going to invest a significant portion of ourselves in this. Even if we're not going all in, we're still investing a significant portion of ourselves in this, knowing that it has a certain date that it's going to end, and that the goal is that we will have this deep connection for the time that we're together, and be able to part ways amicably at the end of it, having shared that experience.
The funny thing is, outside of the military, the BDSM community is where I saw more people embracing that. Not even just the polyamorous community. Granted, oh my God, they were amazing.
Yeah.
But seriously, being in the BDSM relationship was quite interesting to see how people really embrace the limited term relationship kind of thing. And the first time I really saw it, shamefully enough, we're going to have to say it was 50 Shades of Grey. How they would, oh my God.
It's just something, unfortunately, that we have to admit that our generation was introduced to this being acceptable by 50 Shades of Grey. It was our gateway. And so it has its place.
It does have its place.
So go on though. What was your connection?
So in the first book of 50 Shades, in the 50 Shades trilogy, Christian and Anna were discussing their contract and how long their contract was going to go. And I'm like, and like at the age, I'm like, that makes so much freaking sense. Like, we're still going to invest our time and energy into this relationship, into this dynamic, into this agreement. But that doesn't mean that it's like not going to be meaningful. Like, they obviously were going to really invest in each other. And granted, again, 50 Shades of Grey is not a valid or great, I shouldn't say valid, but it isn't a great example of a BDSM dynamic. But it is a great introduction, because I saw, like, I'm like, okay, people actually talk about this. Why can't I talk about this?
Right.
And, oh goodness, it really was. Like, we really should go into at one episode at one point talk about how 50 Shades was a gateway to so many things.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. But yeah, the point is that, like you said, a contract. When we come into a relationship with the expectation of what it's going to be, we are able to have a healthier interaction. And then you don't ever end up with inequities where one person thinks they're going to get one thing out of the relationship and the other person thinks they're going to get something different out of it.
Tiny pterodactyl.
Tiny pterodactyl. His name is Squeaks. You'll hear him a lot on this
Um,
show. Yeah, so I guess then, yes, what really defines a limited term relationship separate from a short term relationship is that you go into the relationship at the onset with open communication about how long the relationship might last.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that it can't last longer than that.
No.
But it's circumstantial. It's all sort of a when you get to that point. But it's supposed to set this expectation so that you won't be disappointed when you get to that point.
Yeah.
And then also the other separation from a short-term relationship is emotional investment. You may have a relationship that's only with someone for 3 to 6 months, and it may be an experience for you that is just as deep as the person you will have with the person who could become your life partner.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is that you shouldn't have to feel afraid of that connection because you have this agreement and this safety net of knowing this is exactly what this is going to be in the long run.
Yeah. So, have you ever had a summer fling?
I mean, when I was like 13, I had a boy at summer camp.
That still counts.
That
still counts.
We crushed on him. We kissed in like a
still
rowboat once.
It still counts. Fight me. That still fucking counts.
Okay, it counts. Yes, but
so
the funny thing is that wasn't even my first kiss.
No.
Oh
My God, my first kiss was horrible.
Oh really?
Yeah.
That's a whole other episode.
My first kiss was horrible.
Rookie relationships, another topic.
Bruh, like, oh my God, the relationship. Oh my God, I love men, but men. I love men, but men.
Yes. So I don't think I've ever had a summer fling. I haven't really ever had, in a vanilla sense, a limited term relationship.
Okay.
But that's because, as you and I have discussed before, and would be a whole other topic to talk about, I have the inverse of commitment issues.
Same.
I am overly committal.
Balls deep.
Yeah, lesbian with a moving truck all the way through.
You and your partner, let's be honest.
So much,
you and your partner.
much.
But I get that, I really do.
But yes, and so I haven't actually ever had an experience with a limited term relationship in that type of sense, in the types of ways that general people and our viewers might imagine. Like, what are some types of, because you know me, I've been poly and kinky so long, and I always come from like this poly kink educator headspace. So what are some relatable vanilla examples of limited term relationships?
Let's keep in the topic of balls deep deployment. Deployment relationships, because wow. Anyone who's watching this, we already know that the military already has that morality clause. I really don't want to get into that. But the idea of, hey, I am not currently with my partner and neither are you. Let's make sure both of our needs are met. Now, normally, in my experience in the military spouse and military kid lifestyle, it's not normally done ethically.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's always that understanding, like, my spouse is gone, let's just make sure our needs are fulfilled. In a non-ethical way is a Jody. You know what a Jody is, right?
What?
Okay, a Jody boy is a guy who
cheats on his wife while he's away?
No, the Jody is what the wife is cheating on with.
Okay.
So not like...
Oh, like, because you always tell your husband, oh, I'm going to hang out with Jody? Like, is that the
I forgot how it originally is.
It's like, oh, yeah, I'm going over to this person's house all the time and you use a girl's name. Is that what that's referring to?
I think so. I think that's how it originally started.
Okay.
So not so ethically, that's like one of the biggest things that I've known for like those limited term relationships. So like, my husband's only going to be gone for 8 months or 9 months. Can you help me out? Just like... whatever.
Right, on the DL.
Just on the DL. I mean, like, it's become such a bad culture about it, but it's...
I'm surprised, I guess with your background, that makes sense, but I'm surprised that you would go there, because when I was thinking of limited term relationships in regards to deployment, I was thinking of, like, these young 18 to 21-year-old boys who go from basic and then they get shipped off to somewhere that's not their home state, and they're doing like 6 months in Georgia. Okay, they don't have a partner, but they're in Georgia, like they're living somewhere where they could date someone else because we're still in America.
The funny thing is, in my experience, soldiers, I will not speak for Air Force, I will not speak for Marines, but soldiers in the Army, they meet the first or second girl, and next thing you know, she got a rock on it. And it's the funniest thing. As someone who did it, I did it. Because I was like the second or third girl my ex-husband got into a relationship with, and I got a rock on it. Because next thing you know, because it's like, oh my god, I fell in love. I'm like, oh my god, this is hilarious. It's so great. So that was supposed to be
that is like a thing.
It is a thing.
It is such a thing, and it's like, I know. I feel like it's like, if you're over 20 and you're in the military. And you have any risk of being deployed overseas, you're like, I gotta marry someone and put a baby in her.
Oh my god!
Right away.
My former father-in-law actually made that joke. It made me so uncomfortable, but he did make that joke. It's funny, like,
I've had a lot of friends tell me that. Like, I literally had a woman. I actually had a friend once tell me, someone who I used to work with. She was like, I'm dating this guy. She was like, I went on a couple dates with this guy who's a soldier, and it was like their third or fourth date, and he took her out, and he's like, I just got orders saying that I am being deployed to Afghanistan in 6 weeks. Will you marry me? I will pay you to marry me before I leave. Like, and I was like, oh, like, this is a thing soldiers do.
It's a thing.
I don't fully understand it. If somebody would like to enlighten me on this cultural reference, that'd be great. But
you are not missing anything. You are fine.
Okay.
I promise
I'm
you are
like,
fine.
yes, but that's an intense thing. So, but yes, my idea of a limited term relationship was a guy being like, oh, I'm deployed in Georgia, but I live in Alabama. Like, I'm only here for 3 months. We can date while I'm here in Georgia, and then I'm going to go back home. Like, that's what I was thinking of more than the wife hoeing around while her husband's gone. But I guess that's true, too.
I really want to touch on, like, the non-ethical ways so people are aware that, this is how we avoid it. Like, I want to be able to touch on those non-ethical ways because, like, hey, just in case that you know someone or you have been doing it, you do you, boo-boo. But,
like, be aware.
Be aware.
Because, yes, here we talk about non-monogamy a lot, and we want to make sure we're drawing a line in the sand of where it's healthy and ethical and where it's not.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so deployment is definitely a big part. Summer flings, casual dating, but that falls more back into the short-term relationship thing. I think, and then other job arrangements. Someone who is an architect and they move cities all the time might engage in limited-term relationships where they tell people, yeah, I'm only going to be here until this building is constructed, and then I'm moving on.
That sounds more like common partners, though, don't you think?
It could be, but if you think about it, if you, like, in that situation, if you're an architect, you might go to that city and build that building. You may never go back to that city again.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense.
Because you're there for 6 months building a building, and then it's like, okay, well, if you created this really fancy piece of architectural art, then that's like a piece that's there, and you're going to want to do those in other locations. So, I mean, that's very specific to that job, but I feel like there are a lot of careers where people may travel for business and not go back to the same places all the time, so they can't develop those common relationships in the same way. But so those are all like the vanilla examples of a limited term relationship. But when we get into poly, and especially kink, there's a much more structured dynamic to limited term relationships.
I'm a protocol slut. We all know this.
Yes. So when you get into poly and kink and all of that jazz, the limited term relationships just take on a lot more structure. A lot of times they're defined by a contract or an agreement of some sort.
What are we drinking again?
Oh yeah, what are we drinking? Wait, I bought it. I'm a dork. We're drinking.
Yeah, I just started drinking whatever you poured for me.
We've got Welch's Sparkling Rosé. Non-alcoholic, because it's noon. Yes.
Jesus shit. I mean, we're not sponsored.
We're not sponsored, just pointing that out. We just like to buy fancy drinks every week.
At one point, we will do some kind of boozy thing. At one point, right?
Yes. Actually, we have an event coming up.
Yeah.
That I will tell everyone about at the end of the episode. If you want to hear about our super secret wine event, you gotta stick around till the end.
You told me about this event? Did I just forget about this event? I feel like you told me and I don't remember.
We just talked about it.
I don't remember. Oh, I remember. Right.
I love you.
I'm here. I promise I'm here. Just not all together. You ain't shit. What were we talking about again?
So with limited term relationships, once you start to incorporate poly or kink or things like that, then there tends to be more structure to them. A lot of times there might even be a written contract, or even just a verbal contract. Almost always there's a negotiation where you're sitting down and talking. And I feel like kink is the easiest place to start because a lot of people know, just like you said from that 50 Shades contract, that it's pretty normal practice for kink for you to sit down and at the onset be like, okay, this is the dynamic that we want. This is my expectations of you. And this is how long we're going to engage in this dynamic before we either dissolve or reevaluate, right?
The funny thing is, when we kind of get into like the kink of the BDSM aspect, and not even that, just like semi-contract based.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really wanted to do was go to a conference, and with this conference there was going to be a competition, and I would have been the runner for my friends who were in that competition.
Right.
And I was so looking forward to it.
It was sort of like a pageant, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like a pageant.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what I'm going to say because I don't want to call them out.
Okay.
You know, if I ever get a hold of the runners of it, I can never plug it in.
Yeah, so basically, essentially, you were like, they were participating in the pageant and you were like the assistant.
Yeah.
Or gopher to make sure that they had everything they needed.
Yeah, pretty much. And then COVID happened.
Yeah.
So that was supposed to be their gopher, and I was so looking forward to it because we actually had sat down about it, be like, hey, this is what we need from you. Normally there would have been two, but it was just going to be me at the time. So they told me exactly what they needed, how they were going to take care of me so I could take care of them, and this, that, and the other. It was absolutely wonderful.
That's great.
And the funny thing is with these limited term relationships, limited term relationships, it's great to be able to have that communication because everyone's on the same page. I definitely enjoy those kind of conversations, whether it's just like, hey, this is what we're doing for the night or the weekend, or hey, I need to teach a class and no one's available. Have the person who's normally here to help me, can you do that for me? Kind of thing. It's makes things so much easier because there's the open communication. Be like, I know exactly what to expect out of this.
Right.
And in those short-term relationships, we don't always get that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well,
there's a lot less communication about what people expect, right?
Yeah.
Other than saying, like, I'm not into anything serious. Like, that's about the extent of the negotiation for short-term relationships a lot of the time. But I think you also just pointed out a great thing, is like that was a limited term relationship. Also, there was even just platonic. Yeah. In it, you know, in a way. And it's like, it's not like at the end of that relationship you stopped being friends with them, but it's like, I am going to step up and caretake for you in a different capacity for this period of time. Yeah. And it's sort of the choice to elevate your friendship for a limited period of time. And so that's something to recognize too, is that a limited term relationship doesn't have to mean, oh, we're here and then we're dating and then we're done and then we never see each other again. Yeah. It could also be something like that where it's like, oh, we already have a relationship or we already have a friendship, and like, say you're one of those people who's in love with your best friend. Maybe this is a good option to be like, let's do a 1-month trial period of what it would be like if we actually dated.
I'm so not endorsing that one.
I'm not saying it's the best. I'm not saying it's the best idea, but I'm just saying, because if you go in at the end, if you go in with this expectation of like, okay, if it feels awkward, then at the end of that time, we have no hard feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Setting expectations at the beginning gives a safety net.
True.
To a degree. I'm not saying that would work for everybody, but it
Mm-hmm.
is something where it's like you can elevate your friendship with the expectation that if that elevated level of friendship isn't comfortable for you guys after a certain period of time, that you can sort of backtrack without feeling guilty about it or without feeling like, oh, well, you said you're okay with this and now you're not.
Mm-hmm.
It's no, you said you were okay with this, we're going to try it, and then we're going to discuss it again.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so that sidebar, that was just a good example, I felt like, of something that it is a different aspect of limited term relationships, is elevating relationships for a limited time.
Mm. So. Oh, I really like the idea of that, where we already have this baseline for a relationship and then elevating it for that short-term period. Because whenever I think of like that limited term relationships, I think it's like, okay, it's only because of I'm not going to be around.
Right.
Whereas now it's like, oh, I am still going to be around, but for this period of time, we're just going to do a little bit more or a little bit less.
Right.
Okay. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, exactly. Or like a bite-sized version might be if you're best friends, like for the week of Valentine's Day, I'm going to give you the GFE. Because we're best friends. That may not include sex, but it's like, it's Valentine's Day, we're both single, why shouldn't we enjoy each other like we're a couple and have those Valentine's Day
That was
feels?
certainly fun this past, or like, what was it, this past year?
Yeah.
That was
fun.
We
did our Galentine's Day.
That was super fun. We went on
gosh.
went on a sweets crawl. So instead of a bar crawl, we went on a sweets crawl.
We're gonna have to do that as like an episode. We're gonna have to just do a like cupcake sampling episode.
It was so much fun, except for that one place. Great. I wish that one place was so much better.
Yeah. We tried a lot of places, but and so that's another example. But and then limited term relationships, in poly, it gets a little bit more complex because
I think it's simpler in poly. Really? You think it's a little bit more complex in poly?
I think because it's like in kink, the emotional investment isn't always the same sometimes. You're engaging in something that is, you're going to experience intense emotions during it, but they don't develop the same attachment with a partner because it's not necessarily about the partner. Those feelings are about you. And, of course, sometimes they're also about your partner. It depends on how you're playing, how you're scening, what you're doing.
Okay.
But I feel like in kink, limited term relationships are like a standard part of like early kink exposure.
We'll be right back. But first, let's stop for a sip.
It becomes more complicated because you're dealing with more people.
And dealing with more emotions.
Right,
okay,
and more emotions. And then obviously, like then if we go back to the example we talked about before where you have someone who travels for work and you have, say, because I'm an actress, so DJ and I have talked about the possibility of like, what if, we were married with kids, so he couldn't travel with me, and I get stationed on a set in Europe, and I'm in Europe filming for 6 months.
Okay.
And I'm out there, and I meet somebody, and I can have a limited term relationship with that person, but it's more complicated because like in that example, first of all, I'm spending an extended period away from my anchor partner, which already causes hard feelings because you just miss each other like crazy.
Yeah.
And then I'm giving some of my time to a new
Now
person,
back to our
feeling
podcast.
new relationship energy with them while I'm missing my partner, which then causes me to not miss them as much while they're still missing me just as much. And that's a possibility there. And then, like, in that case, maybe my partner doesn't know this other partner that I'm with, or things like that. So I feel like in poly, it becomes more complicated, especially with stuff like that, where you're traveling for work and maybe you have a boyfriend over here and stuff like that, because then you have to factor in how does that make your partner feel, even if they know that that relationship will end when you come home, how do they feel about the time that you're spending with them while you're away or while you're separate from them?
All the more reason to communicate. I find it simpler in poly because, hey, we already are talking about I'm not going to be home. We are already addressing how we're going to still meet some of each other's needs while I am gone, and therefore also making time to spend with you.
Right.
It's like, it's the age of technology. Fuck it. It's not like 20 years ago where I would, like, my mom and I would have to schedule to go to I forget what the building was called, and be able to FaceTime my dad for 5 minutes. Like,
oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's the age of technology. It's getting better and better with time. So I find that it's a lot simpler because, one, thank God for Google Calendar.
Yes.
Thank God. We're already talking about the needs that we're going to have while we're gone and how we're going to be able to meet those. And since we are already talking about it, hey, I did meet this person. We're already used to seeing other people. We're already making time for each other. Right. Some of time that we haven't carved out for each other, I may be spending with them. Right. So I think it's a little bit simpler that way because there's already the openness of communication that we have. Right.
Well, and I guess defining it as a limited term relationship at the onset could also provide some security for your partner of knowing, like, when you come home, I don't have to compete with your emotions for him because that relationship has been dissolved or demoted to a platonic friendship. Yeah. You know.
We're not going to use the term demoted because...
dissolved or... Well, because if it's...
changed.
Changed to a platonic... Transitioned. That's the word we like to use in poly. We don't break up, we don't demote, we transition.
Which is fun, because demoting implies that it's less than, and it's not.
Right, it's not. You're right, it's not. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah. But yeah, now that we've, sort of defined limited term relationships and what the vanilla styles are, how it relates to poly and kink, I still can't see anything on that screen, no matter how much you zoom in on it. So go ahead and give us our next feeder.
Oh, that's hilarious. Why don't people communicate their expectations for how long a relationship might last?
Do you want to read that again? And I'll blue
that's what you get. You get the candid of me picking up over words. I don't read aloud.
That's fair. Yes. So why don't most people communicate about the duration or the depth that they expect out of relationships?
Because it doesn't talk to us in the beginning. There's so much media out there that allows for interpretation. Be like, what did they mean when they say this? And that's what we've
had so many talks when you're looking at text messages. What do they mean? What do they want?
See, that was actually my New Year's resolution for 2020 was to take people's word for what they said, and I'm not going to think too into it, and it actually worked out really well for me. But I think one of the biggest reasons people don't talk about it is because we're not taught to talk about it.
Right. I guess that's true. Like, we're taught by media, both fictional and non-fictional, that love is this whirlwind that just takes you over, and that when you meet someone, you'll either feel the spark or you don't, and if you get swept up in it, then you guys will date forever, and if you don't, then it'll dissolve. And
those teeny bopper magazines. Remember those little teen magazines we used to read?
How to tell if he's into you.
Oh my God, drove me up a freaking
How to tell if your 15-year-old boyfriend is cheating on you. What? Like, now that I'm older, I'm like,
okay, first of all, that
wasn't in the title. Like, I'm just pointing out, it wasn't 15-year-old in the title, but we were reading Pop magazine. We were 15. Okay?
We were 15. Okay, that article was actually quite helpful, because next thing you know, he was sitting at lunch with freaking Destiny, and if you can see this, yes, I'm still mad you stole my boyfriend in 6th grade. I will forever be mad about that. Forever. Wow. I don't care. I don't care. Don't care. She like.
I love that for you. I love that for you.
It's the one thing I can hate someone over.
That's your one grudge.
That's my one grudges are heavy to carry. Like, I can't carry that shit all the time. But when I think about Destiny stealing my boyfriend in the 6th grade, because she was my friend, and then she took my boyfriend.
The funny thing is that her name was Destiny, and you keep saying, Destiny stole my boyfriend, so you just weren't destined to be with him.
I'm gonna kick your ass.
Gladly.
So if you guys see a bruise on her face on Instagram, you know why. Don't spill my juice. It's okay. It won't be. The bruise won't be anywhere people can see. It'll be fine. You'll be fine. I promise. You're fine. It's okay. Come here. You're good. You're good. Still kick your ass.
Anywho, so yes, the point is that we're not taught to talk about it because we're taught to believe that relationships should just take us over, right? And so it's like, oh, why would we ever set expectations when the expectation is just supposed to be that we'll fall in love and live happily ever after? Exactly. And that doesn't happen. We are in the 21st century. More often than not, when you swipe right on Tinder, you already know how long you're interested in being with that person. Literally, you've already read their profile and looked at their picture. You know, oh, I might be interested in being out with this person for a night. I might be interested in having fun with them for a week. Or, oh, this is someone who looks like, and this is a very human impulse back to our animalistic structure. This person looks like a good partner. It's physiological. Our brains do it. It's annoying.
It's true.
But it's true. So the truth is that why aren't we talking about it? When from the moment you swipe right on Tinder, you already have at least an inkling in your head of how long you're interested in being engaged with that person.
Who's told us to talk about it, though?
Exactly.
Honestly.
We're telling you to talk about it. We're telling you to talk about it.
You are going to mess up a couple of times,
yes.
So please talk about it.
Please. Start having these conversations with your partners. It doesn't have to be on the first date. You don't have to walk in, order a Coke, and say, hey, so we doing this for like a month? Or no. No. But on the second or third date, it's healthy and normal. We are trying to normalize it.
Mm-hmm.
It is healthy on the second or third date to do a check-in and say, hey, are we vibing? How long do you think you might want to try to vibe for?
I missed that one question that people used to ask each other when they were dating, like, you want to go steady with me?
Right.
And
nobody ever asks if you're going to go steady anymore.
No one asks that. I love that idea.
I think the new do you want to go steady is, can I put it on Facebook?
Oh my god. That was a funny thing. That's actually really true.
Although what irritates me about that is on Facebook, you can put that you're in an open relationship. You can't put that you're poly. That's really insulting. Just throwing that out there.
Okay,
but anyway,
Facebook's not going to change that.
I know they're not, because yes, they have to accommodate to the right wing a little bit. Anyway, yes, but you can put that you're in an open relationship on Facebook, but you still can't list more than one partner.
Nope.
So anyway, normalization.
It will
move forward.
It does make things a little bit easier when you're on Facebook dating.
Yeah.
Because they can see that you're in an open relationship when they go to your profile.
Yeah. Oh, right. Because when you were dating your husband and you literally had a few women come to you that were dating him
mm-hmm.
and be like, I think your husband might be cheating on you.
I'm just coming to you as a woman and I'm like, look here, I already know who you are.
So once you had the open relationship option, it made it a lot easier. They go to your profile and they're like, oh, okay.
See, the thing is though, my ex couldn't do that because he was still active duty.
Right.
So my ex
never did get that advantage.
Never got that advantage. I mean, after a while, we had to, sit down, hey, you really have to tell these women, I'm annoyed getting these messages. And then he did, and then I didn't keep getting those messages.
That's good.
There might have been, one time where a guy messaged me, and it was just you know what your husband is up to? And I'm like, yes, I don't know who you are. Last I checked, he didn't swing that way. Yeah. So that was a little weird. Did I tell you about that?
No.
God, that was so freaking freaky. So this guy messaged me, I think it was on Facebook, and was like, do you know what your husband's up to? And I'm just like, what? And that was the first message I saw, and I'm like, last I checked, he doesn't swing that way. I mean, I think I would be the first person he would tell. And he did say I would have been the first person he would tell if that had changed. But then, like, the second message is like, tell your husband to stop messaging my girlfriend. And I'm like, tell your girlfriend to stop messaging my husband. Like,
because it's like, he's not cheating on me. If your girl's cheating on you, that's your
relationship.
So, imbalance of communication. Oh my gosh. So that brings us to, how do we communicate healthily about limited term relationships? Since we've established that no one ever taught us how to do it.
Do it sober.
We're here to teach you how to do it.
Do it sober. Let's start there.
Step 1, do it sober. Even if you're on a date, have this conversation before you've got the beers in you, or the wine, or whatever it is you're drinking. Have this conversation at the beginning of the night. You know, that's definitely a good place to start. And then how do we phrase it when we're coming up to ask somebody? Because the last thing you want to do is like bring the maybe it's going great, you think it's going great, they think it's going great, but you come in and you ask the question, you know, how long do you think this is gonna last? If you ask that to someone who's insecure, they could immediately be like, oh, you must not like me that much. Oh. And that's dangerous. So let's talk about some constructive phrasing. Good ways to phrase things so that our viewers can ask these questions without setting off alarm bells in their partners.
So we'll start with some of those trigger words, we don't start the conversation of, we need to talk. That is immediately triggering. We never start with that. If we want to start with, we need to talk, I suggest you immediately jump into it. If you ever feel the need to use any variation of we need to talk, jump into it right away.
Like, don't even give them the chance to respond. Say, we need to talk about X.
Seriously.
Don't ever just say we need to talk. We need to talk about X.
And that's with almost anything, but especially about how your relationship is going.
But even then, I would say a better way to say that same phrase would be, I would like to start a conversation with you about
I would like to talk about. I would really appreciate if we can open up the conversation.
I want to make sure we're on the same page. These are all good phrases to start the conversation with. And I think that right there gives us almost a good one-liner. You know, like starting with something being like, you know, I'm really enjoying this. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about where we think this might be going. And again, like the sandwich method. I'm sure we've all heard about that from our managers at work, right? Say, I'm feeling great about this, how this is going. I just want to see how, you know, I just want to make sure we're on the same page about where it might go from here. But I'm really enjoying our time together. That helps it so that they know they have that security at the beginning and the end of knowing you're not asking this question because you're trying to figure out how long you're going to have to put up with this. You're asking this question to figure out what to invest. You're at that point of, I've finished the free trial. How much am I going to invest now? So
I really would appreciate when people like would look at me and be like, hey, this is what I want to talk about. Do you have the mental capacity to talk about this right now? And then they're like, no, I don't. And that was one of, I think it was in More Than Two of scheduling arguments. And we're not talking about scheduling arguments in this case, but we're scheduling conversations. Like, hey, at this time, I need to talk about where we're going with our relationship. Can we talk about this now? No, I can't talk about this right now. I have a little bit more on my plate. Can you wait till I have a little less? So scheduling those kind of conversations, it's not a bad thing, because one of the things that we don't talk about with why we don't communicate is scheduling arguments, scheduling conversations, because like we're
avoiding confrontation. Right?
And in which case sometimes we don't. We shouldn't avoid confrontation all the time. I don't think we should. I think confrontation is a natural part of a relationship. Now, how it may go about that's a little iffy. But scheduling that time, scheduling arguments, scheduling conversations about where our relationship is going is definitely a benefit we have because of the age of technology.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it goes back to, again, the idea that setting expectations can reduce fallout because, again, if you are like setting an expectation that you're going to have a certain conversation, then you're both more likely to go into that conversation with a level head and not get heated. Even if not get heated, but if you're going into that conversation expecting that it might be difficult, you can prevent it from becoming a confrontation because you might manage your triggers differently if you're expecting to encounter them. And so that just helps have a healthy dialogue. So yeah, don't be afraid to send a conversation invitation. Like it even sounds so cute.
I love it.
But it's great. Don't be afraid to send a conversation invitation. You make it as cute as you want. Like, you're invited. I'm so excited to invite you to have a conversation about our maybe future together. You know, send it with a little GIF emoji. Do whatever works. But the thing is, the point is you want to establish that you're not bringing it up because you want things to end. You're bringing it up because you want to be on the same page. And then making sure, that you're using gentle language. You're not saying we need to talk. You're saying let's have a conversation. And then let's talk about the second half of the phrase, that how long are we going to be together? There's better ways to say that.
I actually don't know where to go from there because my initial thought is like, instead of saying how long we're going to be together, where do we see the relationship going? But in my personal experience, that is a little triggering. Yeah,
and it can be tough when you start to put it into, we're trying to put a specific definition on the time of this. And the truth is, if you're bringing up the conversation and you already know for a fact in your head that it's going to be a limited term relationship because you have a defined date in your head of, I'm only in town for this long, I'm moving away on this date, or I'm
no longer going to be taking this class anymore.
I'm no longer going to be taking this class, or I'm going to be engaging in something in my life that won't leave me with time for relationships, and I know it starts on this day. All of those things, if you are starting this conversation, if you send out your conversation invitation and you already know that you have a specific amount of time or a specific date that you're like, after this, I'm not going to have the wherewithal to pursue this relationship anymore, then it becomes a little bit easier because you're not asking a question. You're saying, I want to let you know. I want us to be on the same page. I want to let you know that I really enjoy you. I really want to keep spending time with you. But if we continue to spend time together, this is the limitation of it. And of course, sometimes the conversation is going to be hard. Sometimes someone's going to come back and they're going to say, I'm not down for that. I get too attached and I can't just enjoy this for what it is right now. Because that's really what limited term relationships come down to at the end of the day, is the ability to say, this is amazing and enjoyable and I'm going to appreciate it for what it is right now, and not concern myself with what it might feel like to not have that in my life anymore. And of course, obviously, you don't want to just block it out and be like, I'm never going to think about what it's like when they're gone. You don't want to do that either. But because that's not healthy, and then you end up feeling lonely in the end. But you want to be able to
understand.
My brain just lost the whole thought. But basically, it's when you're coming into it, someone might say emotionally that they can't handle doing that with you, that they can't just move on at the end. And there are other people who are like, yes, I can enjoy this energy exchange with you now and understand that it is what it is. And when that dissolves, we don't have to be, you're such a dork. We don't have to be resentful of each other or have any sadness about it.
So the funny thing is, a lot, and this isn't for everyone, just like poly isn't for everyone, monogamy isn't for everyone, kink isn't for everyone.
Right.
But understanding that you have to be okay with having that conversation with someone, and they may not just be down. I had a partner who was like that, and they did not like the idea of being together for the season. Like, this is the season that we have together, and that's it. And it wasn't like summer or winter. It was, hey, I'm not going to be here forever. Do you want to love me while I'm here or not?
Yeah.
And I didn't say it that way, but I'll be honest,
Right.
I did say it that way.
Right, but it's because at one point it was because you were considering a deployment, at another point it was because you were considering moving out of state for another reason.
Yeah.
And just being open with being open with your partners, and so that they have the option to say whether they're comfortable with that or not. Are you comfortable talking for a minute about the hardships of communicating or not communicating the term of relationship when you know what it is but your partner doesn't?
I mean, yeah, we can talk about it. So my most recent relationship ended because I did not tell them that I was making a decision of whether to move with you to California or not. And you being my platonic partner. And because I did not tell them, they were not given the informed consent of whether to stay in the relationship or not. And understandably so, we broke up.
Right.
And, you know, just, I mean, ask me a question, I'll give you an answer. I don't know. It was really hard because they were not the kind of people who could love for a season.
Right.
And that was really hard because the way I grew up, I feel like everyone should. And not that it's like an evolved way of thinking, but it's more like, why can't we all love this way, knowing that not everyone's going to be in our life forever? Because even if we want to spend the rest of our lives together, one of us is eventually going to die. Like, come on now.
And it could be in 80 years, or it could be tomorrow in a car accident.
Exactly.
Right. And but the point is, knock on wood, it is really hard to have those conversations, even when you know exactly, like, you knew this was something that you were possibly planning for. You knew exactly when it was going to happen. So you knew the deadline of your limited term relationship.
And they didn't.
And they didn't. And so, and that the part of that was, again, coming back to ethical and unethical. And this is the part of the show where we admit we don't always make ethical decisions because we're human. We're here to help you guys make ethical decisions, but the reason that we feel like we have any knowledge to be qualified to give you this is because we have made decisions that we've realized in hindsight were the best decisions. We've fucked up, and we really try to keep each other in check and make sure that we're addressing those things for ourselves so that we can then give you guys the best advice about it. And so, it's just that really when you have to give everybody the opportunity to choose to participate in a limited term relationship. But I think the biggest part of that's really important is recognizing that if you know that you only want the relationship to be a certain period of time, it can be scary to communicate that with your partner, and you might not want to because you feel worried about it, or you might feel like you already know their answer. But a lot of times, and I think this is what you experienced, the consequences are worse the longer we keep it to ourselves.
My dad used to say funk does not get better with time.
Oh, funk?
Yeah, my dad used to say funk does not get better with time. In other words, keeping something to yourself, knowing or thinking that it's like if you air it out, it's going to be bad. The longer you keep it to yourself, the worse it gets.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's exactly what happened.
Mildew grows, right?
Yeah,
in the dark. So,
Yeah, so that's exactly what happened. And yes, I did suffer the consequences of it. We're on decent terms. I still technically hate them, which I said to their face, in case they wondered.
They very helpfully said that they hated you back.
Yeah, it was great.
Then,
it was very.
And then you guys did a video call like half an hour later. So the point is, honesty doesn't have to ruin relationships.
They transition though. They do transition.
And that's the crazy thing too, is you guys had what would be considered to be a volatile dissolution of your relationship, but you guys have still managed to find your way back to this friendship that is healthy and workable for you guys. And yeah, so that's the other thing too, is remember, these conversations are hard, but if they don't go perfect, it's also not permanent. You can, as long as you continue to communicate with people, you always have the opportunity to make change. And they always have the opportunity to decide whether or not to participate in that change. But if they don't want to participate in it with you, then they're on a different path than you. And that's what the universe means. And that's why we say that sometimes people are just in your life for a reason or a lesson, is because the universe might have brought them in just to help you make that fuck up or learn from their fuck up. So. Yeah, I will probably make that mistake again. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I know who I am. But it's definitely easier knowing that, like, okay, I've made this mistake before of not communicating how I probably know how the relationship is going to go. And then with the issue of predicting what that person's going to say, no matter how much you think you know them, because you know that, you know, you're going to be together for 2 years, 6 months, the weekend, whatever the case may be. And making it one-sided, you don't give that chance for a person for informed consent. Like, oh yeah, definitely want to be in a relationship with you. And then 2 months down the line, wait, you knew that you were leaving? I'm like, well, yeah, I knew the entire time I was going to be leaving, so you didn't tell me. Right.
Or, you know, I'm not going to be at this school forever, so I'm going to be, you know, going to another college. I'm only at this college for, you know, this semester, whatever the case may be. And that was another thing. The funny thing is, I was with this guy for a little bit when I was a little bit younger. And we were talking, this, that, and the other. And next thing I know, he gets married. So we all know that I've definitely made quite a few mistakes. I've been the wife. I've been the other woman. I've done it. Okay. And while we were talking, because he didn't tell me that he was getting married, and I just didn't know about it, I did end up slapping him across the face. It was so wonderful. He expected it.
We do not promote violence.
You don't.
You stopped me from promoting violence last week.
Did I? Oh, I think I was drunk then, and maybe I did get some vodka.
Why do I do that? What? Yes.
Love me for the time that you have me. Shit. It's exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly. Yes.
So next, and then he's like, well, we're gonna continue to do this, and I'm like, okay, we're only gonna do this for whatever. We didn't actually have that time to sit down and have the conversation,
right? Which
led to a lot more work for me than I expected. I never like, for a while we just stopped talking because I ended up, you know, because I was a serial monogamous for a good chunk of time there, and once we was like, well, I thought we were going to keep going with this, and I'm like, I'm technically married, my dude. Like, I really shouldn't be sleeping with a married man.
Right. But you made a really good point there, that the choice not to put the work into one conversation caused the whole relationship to be more work.
Yeah.
Like, it's like this, you could have had this 2 hours of a really hard conversation, but instead it turned the entire, however many weeks or months you guys were dating, into work.
Yeah. It was something else. And I feel super bad for the people who are, if they ever see this, if this does ever, like, get really big, they're going to be like, she's talking about me. I am talking about you.
She's more comfortable admitting it than I am.
That's fine. Like,
No,
but the
that's
thing
fine.
is, like, I've had a few relationships, and
Right.
I know I've messed up in those relationships. My
Mhm.
ex-husband might see this and be like, "Wow, you admitted that." I'm like, "I'll say it to your face. I know where I messed up."
Right.
So, not talking about where we expected the relationship to go, or even talking about how we might have changed our minds.
Yeah.
One of the catalysts of my marriage was I didn't want kids.
Right.
Right. Don't want to pop out tiny crotch goblins. And instead of talking about it, that's what they are. It's true.
Yeah.
They look like goblins when they come out. Have you ever seen a
They're
newborn baby?
munchkins.
They look like goblins. I'm sorry, but no newborn baby is cute. They all look like goblins. And I say that because the cutest baby, in my opinion, is my little brother. He looked like a goblin.
That's funny.
He looked like a goblin. And instead of like actually talking about it, it breeded not so greatness between us because
Right.
I
Not
didn't.
so greatness.
Let's something where I can think about right now.
No, that's fine.
Because I didn't tell him, be like, hey, the conditions of our relationship has changed. Where
Right.
you expected to have 2.5 kids, I no longer want to do that.
Right.
And instead of like talking about it,
bringing
it up, and it created more distance where there was already distance between the two of us.
And because you waited so long, you may have lost the window of time to negotiate something like bringing in another partner to fill that need for him or resolving your connection in other ways.
That's definitely a different topic, but the answer would have been no.
No, you don't think so?
No,
Okay.
I couldn't, like, as much as I gave a fuck about him,
Right.
and as much as I wanted him to be happy, I could not imagine seeing him dote on another woman while she was pregnant.
That's fair. That's
You know?
that's totally fair and valid.
So instead of like continuing that
yeah.
relationship, I'm like, I'm gonna let you go and
Yeah.
find someone who's actually going to want that for
You know, and I think that brings it back to the quote that I started the episode with of it takes courage to know when a relationship needs to change, for
Mhm.
you to recognize that it's like, yeah, us catching the cancer in our relationship sooner wouldn't
Mhm.
change the outcome.
Yeah.
You know, and it takes courage to go through that. It takes courage to admit it even in the aftermath.
Mhm.
So, and, you know, so we've talked a lot about how do you start this conversation with your partner, some of the challenges that you might encounter. But if your partner comes to you with a conversation like this, how do we manage for ourselves the over before it started mindset?
Oh, wow. So I can't really be able to speak on that because I am that person who's like, hey, this is how long I expect it to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like,
you're very comfortable with the idea of putting limitations on things.
yeah, like at least time limitations because of the way I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm okay with loving you all in. I buy you things, we go out on dates, we make plans, do vacations, and then in a year it's over.
Yeah.
Because I moved, or I'm no longer going to that school, or I quit my job, whatever the case may be.
Right.
Like, we already know that that's how it's going to end, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
I'm already okay with putting limits on time limits on relationships. It makes things easier for me.
Yeah.
Especially being a military kid. I don't know if every military kid has experienced that. Some military kids have adapted in other ways, but the way I've adapted, I am grateful that this conversation is happening now. Because prior to our relationship, we didn't really talk about it too much.
Right.
But prior to my relationship with my other partners, didn't really talk about it much. You know what I mean?
Fair. Yeah.
So I don't know really how to be on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, and I guess that's fair for me too. I've never been really on the receiving end of it. So I guess maybe some of you guys as viewers could share with us, and we'll share it on the show, if you have any advice of how you think if your partner came to you, or if you have had a partner come to you, how do you manage that mindset of feeling like it's over before it started just because you know that it has a time limit to the relationship or things like that?
So being on the receiving end of the, wanting to, or someone's coming to you, be like, hey, I just want this for a season, kind of thing. I don't think it has to be something that's overcome. Like sometimes it's not for you. Like,
right. Yeah. And if you're someone that does immediately feel like, oh, well, I don't want to invest in this if I know it's not forever, that's okay. That's your boundary. And you have every right to set that and not engage in a limited term relationship.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the truth is there are some ways to overcome it. If you guys have any, I would like to hear about them. But at the same time, you don't have to overcome it. You don't have to be okay with a limited term relationship if that's not where you're at. And that's really what we try to come back to in this show as much as possible is everything that we talk about is stuff that isn't for everybody. We're just trying to help the people who it is for recognize that they're not alone and that there's resources, and hopefully be a little bit of a resource for you too. Yeah. But you, with everything you're trying, whether it's a limited term relationship, whether it's polyamory, whether it's kink, whether it's swinging, whether it's a new job, you have the right to say whether you want to keep engaging in that and letting it be a part of your life. And you should always feel empowered to do so.
No is a complete sentence.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Yes, it absolutely is. And unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our podcast for this week. Oh my gosh, that sort of ran away from us. That I didn't expect us to go so deep with this. Yeah. But I'm glad that we did. And if you guys have any questions about anything we've said this week, please ask us. Let us know. We might feature your question in another episode coming up and then talk about it. So please feel free to drop a question in the comments or ask us. If you want it to be private, drop it in the comments. We'll DM you just saying, hey, I've got a question. And then you can DM us and we'll talk to you about it. And that'll be great too. But since we're heading out for the week, did you have anything that happened this week that you're excited about? Want to share with the class?
I finished the 3rd book in as many weeks.
Ooh.
Which is a huge deal for me. Getting back into reading is absolutely wonderful.
Yes!
So
awesome.
Unfortunately, I am going through book drop, so I am hoping the next book that I just got is going to be just as wonderful.
That's so tough.
I hate it.
The worst.
I hate book drop.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I am just getting back into not depending on social media to entertain me. So that's what I'm trying to manifest in the next couple of weeks.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
How about you? What's going on?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I actually did anything that exciting this week.
Boring is a good thing.
I got the podcast edited in 2 days, which was great. The first episode took me like 4 days to edit, so I did that. And I guess I posted the first podcast episode.
That was actually quite cool.
So I guess that is something we both get to brag about. We aired our first episode.
Was finally able to put it like a link in bio on my TikTok. I was just like, yes.
Yeah, that's so great. Which, speaking of TikTok, why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can find you?
Oh, it's easier to find me on TikTok. I have an Instagram, but I don't use it as much. But find me on TikTok at bunnygirl9621. Always in the comments. And I do have an Instagram. It's bunny_girl9621. I tried to get bunny girl, but someone already took it apparently.
Somebody already took it. Yeah.
But yep. I'm usually on TikTok. That's where I post the most. And yeah, I think that's about it. Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of which, before I plug myself,
we
have a TikTok live event coming up on her TikTok account. It is actually, from when this podcast airs, it is going to be tomorrow night, Thursday night. We are going to be hosting Thirsty Thursdays, onesies and wine.
Thirsty Thursdays.
Yes. So we'll be wearing our onesies, drinking wine, playing some dorky games, and answering your guys' questions live on TikTok for an hour or two. What time do you get home from work?
I usually get home around 8:30. So I'll do a TikTok event.
Yeah.
So I'll post
So
on
we'll
TikTok
post
an
a
account down
TikTok
for it.
event. I will post on the Instagram page, and I'm going to start advertising this event even before this episode comes out. But if you haven't heard about it yet, Onesies and Wine tomorrow night on TikTok Live, Bunny Girl 9621, and also to promote, I am on TikTok and Instagram, both under CaitlinSayersSays, spelling in the description down below. And this is also a little bit of a promotional event. I am trying to get my followers up on TikTok. I've really focused on Instagram. Now I want some of y'all to move over to TikTok and follow me there too, so that I can start getting ready live with you guys in the mornings and stuff like that, and hang out with you guys even more. So, yeah, go over to TikTok and Instagram, follow me at CaitlinSayersSays, or you can find my public Facebook page and follow my Facebook stories by searching Caitlin Glidewell, also in the description down below, in Colorado, and find me on there. My page is public. So, and then you can also follow the podcast on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube under Turtle Bunny 20s. That's Turtle Bunny 20s. So make sure that you hit that like button, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on TikTok and Instagram, and we'll keep bringing you, new topics and cute dorky moments every week.
More of us.
So thank you guys for watching. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
Oops.
Have you avoided? You can see me right now?
Yes, I can see you. I can see your facial expression. Yes, I know I'm blind. Thank you. So back on topic. I can't read the screen.
You're so blind.
Literally, guys, let's see here. Ready?
I'm sorry.
Now I can see my hand. It's about this far from my face.
She smokes weed. It's not COVID.
What am I gonna do with you?
I love you. I do. Oh, look at one now.
Your nails are sharper than mine.
What are you trying to see, Sophie?